What is AI SLOP and is it harmless or harmful? We tell you on Press Perspective today. Hello, welcome to Press Perspective for this Tuesday, February 10th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we talk about our rampant exposure to AI SLOP online and its broader implications. For more on this, I have Kelly Kasulis Cho, an independent journalist here in South Korea. Kelly, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Steven Borowiec with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Steven, it's great to have you here.
Nice to be here, thanks.
Kelly, we shall start with this new jargon on the block, if you will. So AI SLOP, this terminology, it's been making headlines since late last year, I believe. Let's start off with the definition and your takeaways.
Yeah, it's kind of like slang. So there's a wide-ranging definition for AI SLOP. I mean, you often see online people will dismiss something as, oh, this is just AI SLOP, meaning like something that is really low effort, usually not believable. It's AI-generated content. It might be purposeless or meaningless. Like it's not even trying to send a message or convince you of anything. It's just kind of nonsense for the sake of invoking reactions or a longer engagement time. So why do we see so much AI SLOP, even though it's a waste of energy and resources? It's because people who are trying to make profit off of platforms like TikTok or Facebook, they benefit from engagement, they benefit from sharing. So sometimes AI SLOP is actually just something that is shared and reacted to for the absurdity of it. So I've seen examples of like photos of like an anthropomorphic dog, so like a dog that has like human hands saving like a child from a flood, or a dancing piñata that has come to life. Like that would be AI SLOP. It could also be a term that's used for something that is maybe slightly convincing, but also very obviously fake. So for instance, your grandmother might be sharing AI SLOP. Like she might see something that she believes because she doesn't have so much of a discerning, trained eye. And her granddaughter might comment, Grandma, that's AI SLOP, meaning like, how could you believe this? This is clearly fake. So that's kind of the term that's being thrown around, yeah.
Right, and Steven, apparently South Korea, reportedly, it stands #1 in terms of AI SLOP consumption. Could you tell us a bit more about this reality, the reasons behind it, and its broader repercussions?
Well, I know Korea likes being #1 in the world in some categories, but this is probably not one of them. I would just say that there's probably like a pretty direct correlation in just like a very wired population, a population with very broad smartphone distribution, and just being online a lot in general is going to lead to a high consumption of AI SLOP. This is as we all know, this is a very wired society. This is a society where there tends to be quite quick adoption of new technologies and new ways of doing things. There was an interesting piece in the Straits Times, the Singapore newspaper, that quoted experts as saying, like, ever since what Koreans call the IMF crisis, the financial crisis of 1997 and 98, there's been a pretty pervasive sense in South Korean society that like if a new technology is introduced, that it is incumbent on you to like adapt to it quickly, to adopt it quickly, so that you are not left behind. I think this is a society where reinvention is kind of baked into the national psychology. Like this is a country that's come from being mostly agrarian to light manufacturing and then heavy industry, and then is now kind of looking for the next high-tech thing to carry the economy to the next level. And I think that several years ago we would hear all the time about the fourth industrial revolution, or the metaverse, like a lot of these technologies that that initially had a lot of hype and a lot of buzz around them, but like didn't really take hold. But there was a lot of interest in them, both from just like private citizens and on a government level. So I guess what we're seeing with AI is of a piece with all of that. And I would just, the only other thing that I would add is I just think in Korea, like another part of the psychology is an emphasis on like doing things very efficiently, on not wasting time, on not dragging your feet, not getting left behind. That like this, if you look at this country's history, there's a common sense here that like the rest of the world had more time to develop. Korea got out of war in the early 1950s. And the Western world that had these a number of peace years, and South Korea had to work that much harder to catch up. I think AI is kind of dovetails with that view of social development, in the sense that like this is a way of cutting corners. This is a way of doing things really efficiently. Like instead of spending a half hour like Googling and reading documents, just ask a large language model to spit back to you a really quick summary, and onward, 열심히 하자, what's our...
빨리 should we go with that?
All of that, yeah. How can I leave that one out? That's the most obvious.
Kelly, with regard to the ramifications of AI SLOP, quite a number of experts not only highlight the waste of time and, of course, disruption of concentration, but also the presence of false information. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I'll take that bit for bit. So in terms of a waste of time and concentration, I think that's been an issue that has been well studied and well documented regardless of AI, right? So the advent of smartphones and social media, screen time is incredibly high. I saw one study that estimated that the global average for screen time is 6.8 hours a day. That's pretty wild. So that's irrespective or regardless of AI. With that said, I think when you're looking at AI SLOP, if you will, in the past, to have something be a hit on social media, it had to organically be engaging, right? Someone had to act something out. Someone had to capture a really rare chance moment that really elicited a lot of human response. Now AI basically allows someone to generate something just as captivating, but also fake. So I think you probably could say maybe there's an influx of scrollable content that's meant to shock, meant to outrage, meant to keep people stuck to the screen. And that's not something that was maybe as achievable when people had to put more time and effort to create that kind of content. Time and concentration is a real health issue. I really recommend, if anyone wants to read something about it, Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. I actually read that book twice because I found it so shocking. But there are certain bits about what literally not being able to concentrate over extended periods of time does to the brain. There are some studies to suggest that, like deep sleep, we have states of deep focus, and if you can't get there, that part of the brain actually kind of loses or atrophies the ability over time. There's also research in that book that's cited to suggest that, if you hear your phone buzz and you don't even look at it, like a notification or something, that can disrupt your focus so deeply that it might take an average of 20 minutes to get back to it. And so they're, in the same way that we see now that people have less navigation abilities and that part of the brain is atrophied because of GPSs and stuff like that, they're starting to see some of that with our ability to concentrate, which is pretty scary, and maybe AI SLOP could accelerate that. But in terms of fake news or false information, obviously there's a lot to be said there. The Trump administration, just as an example, has been accused of doctoring images of mugshots and things like that with AI to make people look, less likable. We see government uses of this that are quite alarming. We obviously see false information being spread. People are losing the ability to discern what's real and what's not. There were AI images of Renee Good being circulated, the woman who was shot and killed by federal agents in Minneapolis, being circulated, and a lot of people believe that those images were real. I mean, there's just a lot there to be concerned about. And I think, some people have said to me well, I use ChatGPT or Gemini, but I'm still reading, right? I'm still asking and looking for information. But I think that's a pretty slippery slope. I mean, we are journalists, right? We're paid to go out and verify information, talk to experts, and kind of frame something that is not only utilitarian, but sensical and fact-checked for people. And same with books. I mean, people spend a lot of time writing books, researching for books. They're filtered through a publisher. There are people who are on the hook for that information, that are held responsible for that information being incorrect. That's not the case with AI, right? reading or not.
Right, unfortunately. Stephen, last month, South Korea's AI Basic Act, it went into effect, seeking to promote, of course, productive advancements in the field of AI. How does this act perhaps look to tackle AI slop, do you think?
It seems to me like the overriding goal of the legislation is a kind of transparency. So I think according to the principles of the law, anybody who has produced something using AI, it is incumbent on them, the law imposes on them a responsibility to label it in some way. And so that if if you're on YouTube and you're like scrolling through videos, like a video that has been generated with AI would have to have some kind of clear explanation, kind of flagging that it is AI and that it is distinct from a video of actual human beings. And the act also highlights what it calls like high impact sectors. So like if AI has been used in healthcare or transportation or hiring practices or biometric analysis, like things that have the potential, kind of higher stakes, things that can affect, whether it's safety or any other kind of a high stakes outcome. The idea is that this has to be clearly elucidated and has to be flagged so that people can understand that this is the way that a particular decision has been arrived at, or this is the way that like a particular machine works or something like that. So, I mean, I think it's just I think we're going to see a lot more legislation of this sort, kind of like imposing on creators a duty to just be upfront about use of AI. But the bigger question is like just how effective that will be, because like one thing that we know about law is that it moves a lot slower than technology does, and presumably like there are more and more ways to use AI in a way that is like harder to detect and more kind of surreptitious. And there are bot farms all over the world that are leveraging this technology to produce content that is all intended to provoke emotion and like intended to go viral and intended to, in a lot of cases, like as Kelly was just alluding, like things that are deliberately included with the purpose of misleading. It's not just that there is a risk that this could be misinterpreted in some way. Like there are actors who maybe it's a political motivation or it's a commercial motivation or whatever it happens to be that are looking to muddy the waters and are looking to inflict a kind of a sleight of hand by using AI. So this is one, I think Korea has been more proactive about this than other countries. I think this legislation is kind of one of the more ambitious examples of this kind of work, and I think we'll definitely see more of it.
Right. Also here in Korea, Kelly, findings show that AI use in the South Korean workplace has surpassed 50%. What more can you share?
Yeah, so that news article that shared that had also said that South Koreans use AI in the workplace more than other parts of Asia, but that the use in terms of delegating tasks with it or making work more efficient might be less than other countries. I have to chuckle when I hear that because when I think of South Koreans, I definitely think of early adopters. The smartphone penetration rate for senior citizens here far surpassed the rest of the world much earlier, and still probably that is the case. Obviously, the internet here is fast. There was the 5G race. Koreans broadly tend to adopt new technologies really quickly. But in terms of using it in the workplace, but maybe not as efficiently as they could be, I think that also just reflects broader labor trends. Like if you look at South Korean working hours, it's some of the highest in the OECD. But then when you look at the productivity output of those working hours, they're pretty low. It's a lot of people probably being stuck at the workplace because their boss hasn't gone home and they're pretending to work and messaging on Kakao Talk, right? Unfortunately, that's the truth of the matter. Output could be better for the amount of effort that is being put in. And so it sounds like, a lot of people are playing with AI, but maybe they haven't figured out how to actually use it in the workforce in a way that makes sense. And I don't blame them because I don't know how to use it in a way that makes sense for me at all either. I've tried a couple of times using Gemini or ChatGPT. I guess it's useful as a first draft of where to look when I'm researching something. Maybe it brings up a couple of studies or experts or something that I can look further at, but I haven't really figured out a way to use it that makes sense, and it's probably a part of my life far less than that of the average South Korean. So your average South Korean will probably figure out how to use it in a way that really works for them faster than me. So kudos to that.
Well, this South Korean is quite confused, equally as confused as you are with regard to using AI a bit more productively. Stephen, quite a number of critics, they claim that AI, it's widening existing inequalities. What exactly have they been saying? And what are the proposals out there to deal with this particular issue?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of inequality you're referring to. I mean, the really scary scenario with AI is that it erodes all the interesting jobs, all the kind of middle class or entry level jobs, and it brings us to an economy where like this technology is so useful and so broadly applicable that you have like a small number of companies that own this technology and are reaping all of the profits from it. And there's just not, there is no longer a firm that you go to file your tax return because there's just AI software that does this for you, but you got to pay some amount of money to use this software. It's way cheaper than you would ever pay an accountant. You're just kind of like the Amazon business model, like applied to a whole economy, where like in the United States, instead of there being 100 companies that would produce and sell pencils and housewares and all this kind of stuff, that just all goes through Amazon. And it's just a kind of like massive sucking to the top of economic wealth and opportunity. That's the kind of scary scenario. But I think there's a few others. I mean, I think that looking up this question a bit, like you see that there's the question of inequality between countries. Whereas if you look at developing countries, typically the way that economy develops is by moving from agriculture to a kind of manufacturing, and then to more value-added manufacturing, and then like creating a kind of middle-class tax base that then allows the government to invest in better public services. As AI takes over more kind of more tasks, like more factories are run by robots and all the rest, that is it possible that developing countries can never get their foot on the kind of development ladder, and that AI will affect a kind of permanent global underclass? That's another kind of scary scenario. And just one more thing, I would like to, I say this as the father of a small kid, like speculate about the possibility of a cognitive inequality, because I just think that there's a scenario where like working parents who can't afford extra tutoring or childcare, if they're increasingly leaving their kids to study or to be entertained using AI tools, and they don't have the time to read to them or to interact with them on a permanent basis, but then more middle class or more upper class parents, we hear about like the titans of Silicon Valley, like all send their kids to schools where there's no screens, and then they teach them to read books and they teach them to like write things by hand because they know of the kind of effects that regular use of this technology can have. So if this goes ahead, like would we perhaps end up in a scenario where you have like a large majority of kids or of young people or young adults farther in the future who did not develop these parts of their brain that like relied very heavily on widely available AI tools and did not develop kind of basic cognitive functions, and then you have like a kind of smaller set of the population that did. So does that create another, kind of social chasm, like another way where you have, like we have politically in a lot of countries where you have people who don't agree on the basic facts of what's happening in the public sphere. You have half of the population that thinks that this politician is evil, and half the population that thinks that this other side is evil and like believes conspiracy theories. Could things get a lot worse along those lines? I hope I'm not being too doomsday here.
No, but I see where you're coming from with that. With regard to concerns in the workplace, Kelly, quite a number of observers, they claim that AI, while it helps to perhaps amplify the skills of experienced workers, it could actually hurt the working experience, if you will, of entry-level workers, as it takes away perhaps the opportunity for them to foster skills needed for that work. Basically, I think they were saying that AI, it amplifies the skills of experienced workers, while it essentially takes away the opportunity for entry-level workers to actually come up with those techniques to like nurture them, foster them.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just my personal opinion and not representative of any company, but if you just look at journalism, because this argument's being made for some early career journalists, and I don't want to dismiss their work. There's a lot of great early career journalists and later career ones. I've seen some gaps, like when I was starting in journalism really young, how did you get information? I used to call down a list of every police station in a state and say, hey, is anything going on? And this was at the very advent of Twitter. And so once in a blue moon, some person who stays in their basement and listens to police scans all day would tweet that something happened. And then I would go out with a crew and physically arrive to the scene of a fire or some kind of situation and gather information from there. So I learned from doing. When you learn from doing, you also see where potentially something could have been wrong. And that your on-the-ground experience or your experience actually speaking to people kind of changes the narrative of what's actually going on. It was really about witnessing something and writing about it. And then with time, what I saw in some parts of the industry was those people stopped going anywhere. They would just pick up the phone and call if they saw a tweet or an alert about something happening already. So now you're no longer fishing for information out of the blue to find something that no one knows about yet, right? You're reacting to something that someone does already know about. But then also you're missing that in-person connection. So around that time, there was a lot of advocacy for more boots on the ground reporting. And then as the industry continued to deteriorate, entire jobs became journalism behind a desk. And that became kind of a normalized thing, whereas going out, being away from your cubicle and in the field was kind of almost a luxury within the industry. Maybe Steven would agree. And something that was kind of saved either for the older, more seasoned journalists, or if it were local news, maybe there's something that nobody wants to do that they send the young person out on, right? But what you miss there is even more of the human experience, and it becomes less normalized in the industry. And I think what we're seeing now is, a situation where people aren't even calling anymore. They're just reacting to police statements that are put on Twitter, or they're doing an AI search to find those statements. And I don't want to blame all of this on the industry as a whole or AI. A lot has changed in that time. The dot-com bubble burst. People want information faster. There's more people doing journalism in some way without training, so also the quality of information has declined, and people's desire for something that's more vetted, I think, has generally declined. I think a lot of media outlets that still go through, say, two-source confirmation for a piece of information get laughed at now because they don't have it as fast as a blogger that uses TikTok, right? And so speed has there's just a lot of economic pressures on the industry as a whole. And I'm sure there's that replicated many times over in other industries that, I can't even imagine.
Right, industries beyond journalism, of course. I think we can actually talk about this for hours. I'm afraid that's all the time we have at this moment, though. So we're going to end it here. Hopefully we have more time for this conversation in another session. All right, Kelly, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Steven, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching.